the energetic cost of the masks that we put on in life, in business, in work, in dealing with certain situations. Now, when we are trying to create a certain type of life or work or relationships or business, we often put our best head on, So if you're going out, for example, on a date, you make an effort to wear a certain, maybe clothes, or the way that you take a certain amount of care in the way that you present it, right? And it's the same as when you go for an interview for a job, or when you are trying to, maybe sell a product or service. There's a certain way that you may show up, right? And some of that is more authentic and some is not. No matter how much we all try to be more authentic, there can be this balance between putting an effort in, right, and showing the best aspects of ourselves and, the certain traits of ourselves, while still remain authentic, right? And that's not always easy. And the bigger problem is what we sometimes think, what we think we are, and what we actually are can be a bit different. And, how we present ourselves or how we want to be seen may be different from what we truly are. Now, of course, the more that we align with ourselves, we become a more powerful version, a higher version of ourselves. But I'm a great believer that we all have this high potential within us. But the problem is not that wanting to be something. It's when that want to be something is misaligned with who we truly are at our core. And I can give you lots of examples in my career where, I could see that certain therapists, healers or coaches or whatever it was that, people that were, selling a certain business were trying to be something where their greater gifts and their more natural innate traits were something else. And one example just that comes to mind when I'm talking about this was actually it was someone that it was an email I received reaching out to people on their email list and could they do them a favour. And it was about looking at a person's website that they had created for them, and then looking at their page and looking at the difference. But one of the remarkable differences was this: the page, the website was beautiful. It looked very high end. It was quite luxurious, and it had a certain, a certain, to me, there was a very much queen archetypal energy through it. And it was presented as more high-end products and someone that had that high-end backbone, what you would call a high-end experience. But when you looked at our Facebook page, it was nothing like that. It was someone who completely was a different person, was the person who was right into resourcing, being organic, was about, she was very into recycling things, repurpose. She was quite hippie-like. Even just the way she presented herself, she was like someone that was maybe to be more like someone who enjoyed being maybe a traveller, having their own, homestead, right? But living a very rural life. And it was completely a different archetypal energy that I'm thinking, am I on the wrong page? It was completely opposite. And even though this woman had created a beautiful website for her, there was nothing in alignment. So the way that the email was presented, the person was looking for someone to say how, good the website was and, compared to her page. But I think what she was missing was she lost the personality, the quirkiness, the uniqueness, and the person that was not the mask of this website that was being presented, right? Now, we all can have different masks, but we can also have, it's not just masks, it's like we all have different layers to us and different elements that some people see and some people don't. It's like, I've said this before, I'm a woman that's had a lot of disabilities, right? And if you had even seen me up to just 3 years ago having to go to an appointment, like a medical appointment, I struggled to even stand straight, right? And would struggle with all sorts of balance issues and whatever, right? And one of the looks that I get for people is this level of pity and, oh my God, look at that woman, because I would have no control over my body in relation to noise, balance, right? And it's interesting recently, because I've started to write stuff for a book. And one of the things I realised, I didn't have any video or any content to show people. My family, my closest friends has had to heartbreakingly watch some of the things that happened to me and a lot of the challenges that you don't see. Now, that doesn't mean you have to see it. I show up and I do my work and I do talk about it. Maybe I talk about it too much sometimes. But one of the things that I also don't always share is the really tough days, the tough evenings, right? And so people don't always see that. And it's not that I feel I'm being unauthentic. I feel some of it's really not interesting. We're bored the pants and it's not relevant always to what I'm talking about. But the reality is real. Recently, waiting desperately to be seen by some sort of specialist because some of the symptoms I have are quite serious. They're life-threatening. And I'm in a situation at the moment where I still choose to do my work for lots of reasons, and I choose to move forward and I choose to create and I do what I'm guided to do. But on the other end of that, there's a whole other spectrum that people don't see. So it depends on what angle people are seeing, right? I don't think many people are interested in seeing how I can't walk and I couldn't do certain things. And depending what I'm doing to help people, they're more interested in that aspect, right? So, or is it that I'm hiding? Am I hiding that part of me? Who knows? Like maybe I am. Right? But one of the things that I remember years ago, I've done a lot of work in myself and, there's things I know and sometimes I say things online or I say in a video and I think, oh God, I've done it again, right? And then I've learned not to be as hard on myself because I know I'm human, right? And I know I have just as many shadows as everyone else, still working through that. I remember, when I was quite young and it was my early 20s and I was quite ill and it was like someone came and brought a mirror and shone a light on an area that I didn't really want to see. And in a way, I didn't see it the way that maybe other people saw it, but it was eye-opening and it hurt. Oh, it hurt. And the thing is, sometimes our biggest lessons when someone shines a light on something and someone triggers us and has that impact, we may not like it, but it's a huge lesson for us and a huge chance for us to look at it and to grow. And in that situation, I remember this person, it was a friend's brother, and he'd came to just pop in to see me. I wasn't that great, and I had been sitting, lying in the garden with my parents at the time, and I was quite ill. And I remember him popping in during a break at work to pop in and see me, which was really nice of him doing. But I remember he made a comment, and I was so shocked, and he said, "But Eileen, you were always so soft, and you've always let everyone just walk all over you. And, you've got a big heart, but you just let people walk all over you. In fact, if you were an ant," and this is what he said, "it would be like someone standing on the ant and squashing them, like a boot." He said, like a boot. It was something like a boot, would squash this ant. That's what you're like. And I looked at him and I was horrified because, of course, that was only his perception, of course, because we all kind of people in our life or people we meet, particularly even in the online world, people can make lots of perceptions that are not always accurate, right? But there was something about what he said that made me realise there was an element of truth in what he said. It wasn't the whole picture of me. There was a lot of things about me that were very strong, and there was lots of things about me. There was another side of me. Until I understand, this friend stayed, like in a street just next to where we stayed. And there was another family in that street, and his mother would describe me the opposite way. I remember she used to come out, and I was a bit wacky as a teenager, as in I would dress quite wacky, and I would dress and all sorts. Sometimes it was really stylish. I would copy something out of Vogue. I was very lucky. My mum was, taught us, particularly me and one of the older ones, how to dressmake. We were right into that from we were very young. So, and I went to college and I worked for designers, right? And I could copy things. And I remember at this point, just before this point when I get really ill, I had worked for a designer who helped me make, it was almost a copy of this beautiful jacket out of Vogue. And some of the clothes that I wore at that point were either really off the wall, really outrageously wacky, or they were really stylish. And so much so that when I went to the local disco, I got so many jackets and coats stolen. That's what actually happened, because, these things in many ways were probably priceless. The only thing is I was tiny in height, so a lot of the proportions would maybe be out for someone. But I remember this woman going on about how, when she never then saw me, I wasn't able to, I'd walk down the street dressed up, and I was always walking everywhere, I was always dancing and things like that. I was quite an active person. And I remember her comments, how, I was always a breath of fresh air, and she loved seeing all the styles that I would wear, and she said it was so refreshing to see that. So that was one element of me that she was seeing. And then, and she kind of was sad that she wasn't seeing that, right? But that element was still there within me. And there was this version of me that this other person could see. And we all have elements like that. And when we're growing, for example, a business, of course you want to highlight the elements of you that your audience need to see to trust you that you can do that. So, if I was, selling myself as someone that is a creative person and I was helping people with their creativity, and I do that in some of what, a lot of you know with the Spiritual Marketing Club, people would need to feel that creativity and sense that element about me, right? So you were going to bring that to the front. Now a lot of my work is more based on, depth and insight and looking at things from different angles, because most of my audience are really experienced healers, teachers, coaches who want to evolve and they want maybe to take their business or their work to a whole new level. So a lot of my clients tend to want to see the depth. And they often say they like hearing some of the things that I say that are truthful that a lot of people don't say. And, they say that they like that, but I know also other people find that very triggering and annoying and whatever. But the reality is that when you, for example, it's just like being in a relationship. If you're not authentic to who you are, and you're not also transparent about the challenges your life experience and the truth of your experiences, you're hiding a lot of pain and suffering, and you are actually not showing why you do what you do, and you're not showing up as the authentic version of you. Now that doesn't mean, we're all different in what we share and what we don't share, right? But there's another element of this, and one of the biggest things, and also this was also me, is having a mask and not realizing we're having a mask because we're showing up who we were almost conditioned to be, or who we thought we had to be. And so much so that we don't even recognize that we've got that mask. And we do all have these type of masks, but sometimes it's stronger than others. And I'll tell you one of the industries that I see this a lot in is a lot of women that have came from the corporate industry that they had to put on a mask for so long in that industry to almost survive or succeed or to cope, that when they go into coaching, they are coaching from a very corporate and often masculine energy. And it's one of the reasons why I learned the hard way from this and I avoid a lot of coaches that came, I'm not saying all, but a lot of coaches that have that. And I also find there's a lot of women coaches that don't know how to coach from a more feminine and from their own innate way. Now, I don't mean that just someone that coaches and it doesn't have any coaching skills and doesn't even know what coaching is, because there's a lot of that out there as well. A lot of people just add coach to the end of their name, see themselves coach, do a fast track coach, do a self-study thing. I think they're a great coach, but there's no accountability or no awareness. What I'm talking about is when people just don't know how to be anything else but that way because they've been in it so long. And it's like a hard shell. But underneath, there is something more powerful. And of course, that experience that they've had, the life experience and the work that they've done in these industries can be very powerful, because they can bring a lot to the table, particularly in the spiritual sector, that a lot of us don't always do. One of the things that you notice about a lot of these people that come from the corporate often value themselves a lot higher than what a lot of us as healers, therapists, coach have been in the industry 20, 30 years. We very often really undervalue ourselves, And you see this people that are, working with, 30, 40 even sometimes. I know that 40 is not a good number to be working with someone who's too much for a therapist to work with. But we're working with that many people, and you've done that 20, 30 years. And you're still really undercharging, and then you're seeing someone who's coming out in the corporate industry and they've got no experience and they're charging 3-4 times than you. You're thinking, what the hell sometimes? But the reality is they have a different view on their self-worth. And yeah, you probably can be doing, your work might be 10 times more powerful. But there is something about their worth. And sometimes, they bring something else to the table that can be far more powerful. But the reality is that often what happens, they end up with burnout, or they can be very successful at the beginning, and then things start to crumble as they start to evolve and grow. Because as they evolve and grow, the more of their mass are starting to shift, and they're realising how they work before doesn't work. And it's the same with us all. As we all evolve and grow, a lot of we start to realise what masks we have and what masks, are based on, something that's distorted. Or, there is also masks that we want to have. And I'll give you an example. So I've had a lot of clients who want to be more the innocent archetype. Now, we all have all the archetypes in them, but what I mean is, and I can remember one particularly. She was like quite childlike, even in the way she said it. But I want to be the innocent. I want my business to be. And I knew what she was trying to say, but she understood by some of the work that we did that what it was she wanted to be that, but she was something else, because she could not value her own gifts at that, and was not honouring her own gifts and she was so disconnected from herself, right? And something interesting happened, because the more that she started to recognise and value all the gifts that she actually had, she didn't have the same desire, but actually more of that archetype and some of the other inner child archetypes started to come out, and that's kind of common. And I remember, when I started my business, I wanted to be seen as a professional person. Particularly, I had been 7 years really ill and treated at times really shockingly. Anyone that's had to go down the benefit system, and particularly if you have rare conditions, complex conditions that people have stigma or have no understanding of, I faced a lot of discrimination, and I had a whole battle in relation to benefits. So I spent a large part of, in my 20s in the poverty line, and even when I first started my business, because I was only able to do it part-time, I was in severe poverty, right? And it was very, very stressful, and I'm trying to present myself and be as professional as I want. And I remember my mum wanting to help me and saying to me, but it probably didn't help on some level. She said, you're coming across like a little girl. You're coming across like not professional. I always laugh. I'm quite, I know I might come across quite serious about certain things, but anyone that knows me is I have a good laugh, right, and a good giggle. And there's sort of things about myself I don't take too seriously. And it's one of the reasons why I've always used to work with a lot of children and young people would just find, I'm quite easygoing that way. And she said that I was not being serious enough and nobody would take me seriously, nobody would listen to me, and I had to smarten up and start looking professional. So there was me trying to put a professional kind of suit on to an environment that wasn't. And then lots of reasons I even in my space management, just to do with some of the costings of the type of training that I had to do, and the insurance. The insurance was at one point for one insurance policy a year was £1,000, when most of the healers that I knew were only paying something like £30 or £60 a year. So it was that, and that was only for one of the insurance policies. I had another insurance policy that was £1,000 for something else. So there was a lot of big costs, and then professional memberships and other training that you had to do every year. And I remember thinking, well, who's going to pay me that? And you're thinking, well, more down the corporate type route. The corporate route was so complex for me, it's not what it's in. And, I was trying to put on a mask and it was crumbling me. These environments were not suited to me. The empath, the sensitive, the very gentle, caring person who was so misaligned with that environment, who would never work in that environment, right? Who could never survive in that. So there was me putting on a mask, and in many ways, I was putting on a mask for a work that was designed to help people come back to themselves, and I wasn't even being myself. And, that led to it just was very complex, and, it didn't work for me. With other work, where I could show up as me and show even the vulnerable parts of me, share the parts of me and say, look, I've had these challenges. I'm still technically disabled, I've got this. That type of work, because people resonated, people could see through it, they could see hope, they could see things, they could see that transparency. And when you don't have to pretend for certain people, there's an element. And of course, we want to move forward and we want to be hope and we want to think positive, but there's a realness to it, right? And maybe I don't always have that realness, because there's that balance of knowing what to share and what not to share, right? And maybe sometimes I get it wrong. I share too much certain things and don't share enough, right? But I think it's understanding, it's always recognizing what is the mass. And one of the biggest things that helped me was recognize what other people, the energy, and I'm not just talking about general people that I done a lot of work for, really deep work that knew me well, people knew, actually saying, no, this is what you give to the table. This is what the energy, and when people describe your energy, you can learn a lot from that. And again, like that fella at that point, my friend's brother, who described me, I was probably being so soft, so lack of boundaries, that I was a victim. I just let, and I was a bit of a people pleaser. Right? Now I had to learn from that. But I remember when I found out, years ago, what my main archetype was in relation to how I was showing up my business, and and it was strong caregiver at that point, even though the sage and everything was already there, but I remember it was really, that was the most prominent. There was a lot of that was in the shadow, because I was too much overgiving. and too much being the helper because my own wounding, that I didn't get the right help. I had a lot of discrimination. I had a lot of people not listening properly, making assumptions. And I don't want people to have that experience. So even though that's the wounded healer aspect also coming in, and there's a lot of the wounded healer, and the wounded healer had the gifts, but it can also have a lot of the shadow in it. And one of the things that happened was when I thought, I don't want that archetype. I was like some of my clients that experienced, and I tell them this. They were like, oh no, it was like I wanted to be something else. I didn't like that. Because we often do not appreciate our own gifts. We don't honour who we truly are. And this is what I'm going to be talking about in the free webinar, The Self-Aware Practitioner. I'm going to talk about really, really important things that sometimes we miss, and things that we really need to know about ourselves if we really want to make an impact and we really want to do what we're here to do. It's about seeing the power in it and seeing power of things that we maybe don't notice that other people can see, but also noticing the things that might be given as a way that maybe certain work is not a perfect match, or particular clients, or it's just sometimes it's a tiny tweaking. Sometimes I think people get it wrong when I'm saying about things about people not, people that are maybe going to healing and not healers. But what I mean is there's something else that's more specific, that is better, that makes them go, oh, I know what you mean now. They don't see it as a rejection. Now, when I started to see my power, and it was really interesting at that time because I started having to give up certain work that I love just to do with some challenges I had with noise sensitivity and things, and I had to do my work online. And I remember I kept getting all these contractors, reaching out to me, and I'd say, I'm really sorry, I can't do that, but I could refer you on, and I was saying, no, I don't want it. And then they would be saying to me, do you know, Eileen, I'm really sorry, I can't do this work anymore. And then I got all this feedback, and it was beautiful feedback, and one of the common things where, you're always very aware, you were always very caring, you were always very able to pick up things, help, there were lots of things. So it made me, and it was really interesting because people repeated saying certain keywords and things about, and then I'd get dead emotional, and some of my family would meet people that I'd worked with, through the last 13 years when I've been unable to work, and they'd say, look, this, your sister, this, and they would all describe things that and I'd be looking, thinking, God, it's funny how we don't see ourselves how other people see us. But the more that you can see yourself how your clients, your soul clients see you, and the more that you understand what energy that you're giving off, or the energy that is more in alignment with your true nature, the more that you actually get confidence in yourself and think, right, no, that's my path. Those other things are not. And that's my gift. And this is what we're going to be talking about. So it's really important for us to understand, where, when the masks are coming in and out, and it's an involvement, but recognise, am I trying to be something am I not? Or also another one, do I think I'm resonating a certain energy or a certain, persona or whatever, and that's not really where I am. Maybe other people present. And sometimes that's about really being able to accept truth, which is not always easy, right? And, because sometimes when we're going through challenging times, it's often sometimes better to ask when you're, a wee bit more stable or things are well, but I think it's really, really important, there's different layers to this. And it's also the core of all this is what is going to be in my new soul-led coaching certificate and mentoring program. Because the biggest thing that I saw in the coaching industry was outdated approaches and approaches that didn't work for everyone. Or being one of the things that I recognised was I could hardly find a coach that was really could work with empaths and had a certain level of consciousness, but also could support me in the areas that I need support with. I found it really, really hard to get people because they were either coming from a really masculine approach or they weren't proper coaches. They weren't really coaching. So this is what I'm going to be teaching, and you can learn a lot more about that. I will put there's a little kind of form, and there will be a landing page, a big landing page soon about it. I'll put more details about that below. But just remember, there's different aspects to mask. We don't always see the mask we're putting on. There's many layers. And yeah, sometimes, people can think they perceive as a certain way, and that's only their perception. It does not mean it's truth. But, it's often when there's lots of people will say a certain thing, or lots of people that know us, and experience certain things, and the people that really know us well, they will often, can tell us a little bit more. There's also other elements that, empaths can often pick up energy. One of my gifts is being able to pick up energy and subtle energy and notice things that other people do. And that's why I'm going to be teaching things the way that I do and explaining things in a way that may help you get some aha moments that you've never really thought about your purpose and your business. So make sure you sign up for the webinar. There will be a recording after it, if you watch this video after it. But I would urge you to come on to the live, because the live, you'll be able to, interact with me and be able to get more out of it, and I'll be able to help you, maybe things that you've never thought about. We can tweak things down. So I would love to see you on the call. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye for now.